How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are two ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
All right. It is 3:00 and we are recording. So I will go ahead and get started. As mentioned, I have to go through the logistics at the beginning of every session. I was contemplating just recording this little section and then adding it to the video, but some folks actually join for the live session and then maybe don't go back and watch the video. So I had a brief moment of, hey, I'll just add the video piece of it, but there are folks that join us live every week. So thank you for that. But we'll go ahead and get started with the logistics stuff. So welcome. We are in week 4 of the 2024 winter and spring ENP study group from On Scene First. Week 3, I just want to throw out there to just give a quick apology for having to cancel last minute. I broke a tooth and had no choice but to get to the dentist. And then I thought I was going to be able to record. I finally got to record. And then when I had the stuff up at the conference I was at, my computer would not allow me to download the video. And so I had to do it a little bit later than expected. So I appreciate your understanding for that. Usually I try to get the videos out by the end of the day on Monday, and it was just out of my control this week. So it happens. But this week we are heading into week 4, and we're going to talk about types of 911 PSAPs, their services, and some of the equipment that you will find in your center. For those of you that are stumbling upon this video on YouTube and you are getting ready to take your exam, if you are planning on taking either the February of 2024 or the spring of 2024 ENP exam, this is the study group that you want to join. So this study group started on October 6th. It's going to run until January 19th of 2024. So if you see this video anytime during that time frame, head on over to the onscenefirst.com website /training/study ENP. You can scan the QR code there to the left of that bullet point. And once you register, shortly after that, my amazing assistant, my task manager, will add you to the Google group as well as the calendar invite. Now, with that said, sometimes folks will jump on, they have the calendar invite, they have not received access to the Google group after registering. That is because some agencies will block that request to join the group from Google to your government email. So if you have received the calendar invite, but you have yet to receive access to the Google group and you are registered, please shoot an email to info@onscenefirst.com and ask for access to the Google group that you have already registered and don't have access. If you are watching this after January 19th and you are going to be taking either the April or maybe even the summer session and you want to get a jump on the materials, you can go to that same website, theonseenfirst.com/training/study ENP, or again, scan the QR code. So much easier there. And just request access to the winter spring 2024 Google group. That way we can add you. You can get all of the materials. All of the materials are recorded each week, and we give you access to the PDFs. We make an MP3 and any other materials that we decide to throw in there to be helpful. And some practice exams will be coming in the foreseeable future. I did not say near future because I'm still working on some things behind the scene. And then the next study group will not start until March 8th, 2024. So to be notified when that registration becomes available and the link is open to register, head on over to the onseenfirst.com website, and then you can just register for the notification that will go out when we get there. We have excitedly partnered with the National Emergency Number Association of Ontario. And at some point during this study group, this till January 29th, we're going to pick a day where the folks from NENA Ontario are going to jump on, and they're going to share some of their knowledge and wisdom on the Canadian related topics that could be on their exam. So just to be clear, in the US exam, you are not going to get Canadian questions and vice versa. So if my Canadian friends want to scan that QR code, check out what NENA Ontario is doing for you guys or offering for you guys, or any contacts that you may have there, you can do so there. I also want to say thank you to the premier study group sponsor, Rapid SOS. They have been generously sponsoring my study groups since day one. And I am beyond appreciative of not only the work they do in the industry, but supporting me in this endeavor and helping me give back to the 911 profession by providing this study group as well as a few of the scholarships. So speaking of scholarships, you will have until December 8th, I think, to submit for an Unseen First scholarship. But before I get to that page, I just want to say thank you to Rapid SOS. Thank you to Responder Services Consulting, my dear friend Shanar, and LB Communications, my friend Mark Cady, for generously donating to our scholarships to be able to give folks an opportunity to take the exam if their agency does not cover that exam. So if you are a commercial partner and you would like to sponsor an exam for someone, it's $435. And we have a couple other sponsorships available. So if you want that information, go ahead and scan that QR code up in the right-hand corner of the screen, and I will get you the information on a sponsorship. And then here is the website for the scholarship information. Head on over to onseenfirst.com/scholarship, or scan the QR code up in the right-hand corner. We will accept applications until December 8th. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Please make sure that you tell your decision maker, whoever you list as your agency admin or decision maker, whether it's your director or supervisor or anything, that you have put in for the scholarship. Because in the very near future, I'm going to be reaching out to them and just confirming that your agency does not cover the actual scholarship. So we will be honoring that scholarship. That date is actually wrong on this screen. It says we'll be awarding 7 on February 24th. That's not actually the accurate date. It'll be before that, because we need to make sure that we are giving you enough time to register. So it is a competitive scholarship. Don't just write one sentence. We have probably about 15 of them right now, and there's some pretty decent stories there. So keep that in mind as you are wanting to submit for that. And then there are some other scholarships that I know are available. Texas NENA, I know you have to be a member of Texas NENA and live in Texas to be able to receive one of their scholarships. The TINA scholarship, I think you also have to be part of TINA, the Tennessee NENA, and be in Tennessee to get their scholarship. And then there's the 9/1 Wonder Woman fireworks scholarship that also will cover the exam if you want to take that exam as well. So why not put in for them? And if you happen to get them, then it leaves our scholarships for somebody who might not be able to get it either. So lots of opportunities for scholarships. So there you go. So we're going to start with public safety answering points. Some of this information is information that you should be aware of already in your career if you've been here for at least 3 years, if that's part of the criteria to take the exam. I would hope that you know the bulk of this information. There are a couple of slides of some things that maybe you haven't heard of before, but um, it's all condensed here from both the body of knowledge and your manual. And before I get started, there are some slides. I think there's one in here that if there is something listed on the body of knowledge that is just kind of a generic term or isn't really specific, but it's listed there, I'm gonna let you know that I don't really have a lot to say about it because I'm not really sure what it is that they're looking for. That means that I've done extensive research to find out what they're looking for as far as it pertains to 911, or I know the manual kind of backwards and forwards, and there's nothing in there about these particular topics. So I will make note of that for you. The other thing I'll make note of, because there is at least one in here where the body of knowledge will call it one thing and the manual will call it something different, or it could be known as something different. So I try to share that information with you as well so it doesn't get confusing. Because if the body of knowledge says it's called one thing and then the manual is calling it something else, I have no idea what it's going to present like on the exam. So you should know both of the ways that it's referred to. So just in basic, our PSAP types, we know what a primary PSAP is, but I always go over them. Um, I I have a pet peeve when instructors say, "Oh, you know what that is," and they blow over things. To me, that's, for that person that may be sitting there going, "Wow, I really wish they went over that." So a primary PSAP is a PSAP which the 911 calls are routed to from the 911 control office, which is the central office, the end office, the class 5 office. We talked about that a few weeks ago. A secondary PSAP is a PSAP to which 911 calls are transferred to when they go to the primary PSAP first. Okay. And then the alternate and default. Remember, we talked about these last week. It is important for to know the difference between alternate routing and default routing. Understanding that the alternate routing, that's set up in advance and it is a known location for the call that does not make it to your particular center. The call knows that it's going to your center, but it has to be alternately routed because it can't get to your center for some reason. And there's many reasons why it can't get to your center, but the PSAP that call gets directed to is the alternate PSAP. It's like the understudy in a play, right? It knows that it could potentially get your call at any time. The default PSAP is at the end of default routing. Default routing, remember we talked about the emergency call relay centers. Hopefully you had a chance to watch it. I know I just uploaded it yesterday, but if you didn't, you'll get all that information when you watch last week's video. But default routing is when the call doesn't know where to go. And I gave an example of a call that had gone to Northern 911 in Canada, which is considered a default PSAP for us in the United States, as is the Intrado call center in Colorado. So they are designated default PSAPs for a lot of other PSAPs. So if the call doesn't initially know where to go, it's going to go to one of these default PSAPs. So the alternate is designated PSAP to temporarily receive 911 calls when the primary PSAP is unable to do so. And even though the default is also pre-designated, we're not sure which one it's going to go to at any given moment. So I know in my town of Rochester, if the call couldn't make it to us because our circuits were down or anything, it was going to Marion every time. A default, while designated as a default, you don't always know who's going to get that call. It could be either one of the relay centers. As far as the public safety answering point goes visually, just know that the 911 call gets placed. It will head over to the central station and then be delivered to one of the three that you see there. So just be cautious when you're reading the questions. Sometimes they like to fool people and they'll make a statement about a call being delivered first and then primary PSAP will be there, when in reality, given the definition, it might be a situation where the primary wasn't the first place that it went. So just be cautious with that. There are times that the first place it goes after the central office or central station is to a default PSAP or the alternate PSAP, and then a primary PSAP. And then if that default or alternate sends it to the primary, then by definition, the primary now becomes a secondary. But that is an isolated situation. That is not the norm. That is not the rule. It just, by definition, a primary could become a secondary if the call default routed or alternate routed to somewhere else. I hope that makes sense. Then there are a couple more PSAP types that we just need to remember. First, a public safety dispatch point, the ability to receive the call, but does not have access to any Annie or Allie displays. I know that there are some places that are still like this. They will receive the information, or they will receive the call from the primary, but without any Annie or Allie display. And here's again where I will put in a shameless plug for getting access to the Rapid SOS portal. Because if you're a public safety dispatch point and you do not have any access to any type of mapping or caller information, that Rapid SOS portal could be a tool that could be extremely beneficial in any of the 911 calls that get transferred to you. Normally, those calls are transferred on a 10-digit business line or what we call a dumb terminal, right? So it just kind of goes into this red phone, if you will, and the phone doesn't do anything else except you answer it and there's nothing on the end of it. I can't even imagine. And then there's a legacy PSAP, which we have many folks that are still on legacy PSAPs. It doesn't take away from the fact that you can still receive valuable information, but it's a PSAP that cannot process I3 defined interfaces. So they're still using camera trunks, which, if you remember from a few weeks ago, camera trunks were primarily utilized for toll calling, right? So that's what it was created. It captured the phone number, the length of the call, where the call is going to go, etc. So it's just kind of your legacy, still not an I3 based network. So Chris, we are a public safety dispatch point, but we do have Rapid SOS. However, we do not. So I am sure, Chris, you can validate what I'm saying if you're not getting in the Annie and Allie, that the Rapid SOS portal is extremely beneficial for you guys. So that makes me happy to see that. We're going to talk about different types of, and I think a lot of folks, Chris, I'm just going to touch back on that. I think a lot of folks have a misconception that because they're not the primary, they can't have access to the portal. And that's not the case. There are so many ways to be able to get access to that portal, whether it's your own account where maybe you have to type in a phone number, or utilizing the primary agency to be able to get access to that information. It's so valuable. Now we're going to talk about some types of PSAPs in jurisdictions, etc. So when they refer to a single jurisdiction PSAP center, it's just that. It's a PSAP that serves a specific jurisdiction, one jurisdiction. In that situation, they may serve police, fire, and EMS. And it's not unusual to find several single jurisdiction PSAPs in a single county or a state. And I just brought up the PSAP consolidation map for Massachusetts. And while the state of Massachusetts is working towards consolidation and regionalization, every one of those white standalone centers, standalone communities, is its own single jurisdiction. So the colors match, they're part of those regional centers, but a single jurisdiction. Now, again, I'm going to throw this back out here. One of the biggest mistakes that I make whenever I'm testing is I see a word and I assume it's what I'm thinking it's going to be. And so make sure you read the whole entire sentence. And if there's a reference made to single jurisdiction versus single agency, make sure you're reading the full definition or the full sentence to make sure that you're getting that full context of what they're looking for. Because here, when we break down single agency versus multiple agency, single agency is that they dispatch for only one discipline in one jurisdiction. So maybe they bring in the 911 call, but they say something like 911 is your emergency, police, fire, or medical. And if it's fire or medical, it's getting shipped off to a secondary to be processed, or that PSDP to get it dispatched, right? And then you have the multi-agency handling dispatching for multiple services, usually police, fire, EMS, animal control, highway department, and maybe multiple jurisdictions, depending on how they want to do that. But multi-agency is going to fall into kind of two different categories. In Rochester, where I was, we were a multi-agency. We dispatched for police, fire, EMS, animal control, highway department, but we only did it for our jurisdiction. Okay. And then when we move into a place where we have multi-agencies with multi-jurisdictions, we are now looking at either it's called consolidated or regionalized. It just depends on where you are. But Charleston County Consolidated Center is one that I can think of off the top of my head, as is the Regional Old Colony Communication Center. That's where my dispatch center was absorbed. And I shared on Facebook today, they are looking for a director. So if anybody's looking to branch out, that position is available. But that 911 center, any of these consolidated or regionalized 911 centers are going to operate as a single 911 entity. A consolidated PSAP may serve one or more jurisdictions and are usually formed through agreements between all participating parties. So it's not like one community is going to go on board and then all the other ones are going to have say in what happens. There's usually some type of communication that happens between all of the entities. The management structure of a consolidated PSAP varies from place to place. Some are under the direction of a police chief, some are fire chief, some are under a city manager or a board consisting of someone from each of the jurisdictions that they work in. So there's no set um, overview of who is going to oversee that particular entity. Some municipality designs a management structure so that the PSAP director is a civilian employee who reports to a board of directors. So all of them are different. If you've been in one consolidated or regional center, you've been in one consolidated or regional center. Everybody does things a little bit different. Then there is co-located. Co-located, not to be confused with consolidated, it involves separate agencies or agency divisions that are sharing the same communication center facility, the actual building. They have separate areas that are divided by maybe a wall, a pod, but each one of them has their own staff. They don't answer to the same leadership hierarchy. They may or may not have the same CAD. They may or may not have the same protocols. But an example of that would be the city of Cincinnati. They have the police department dispatchers that take the 911 calls. They provide EMD if necessary, and then they transfer fire over to the fire dispatchers, which are co-located in the same room, just on the other side of the room. And then this little co-located dispatch facility just refers back to when San Luis Obispo in California was going to co-locate some of their operations. So it does happen. It has its pros, it has its cons. A lot of folks do this for financial purposes. If we're going to build one center, why don't we just build one center? It just makes sense. But there are some things that are cons as well. So you just need to know the definition. Then there are private PSAPs, which I've only seen a few of these. I'm sure there are many that are out there. I know of one in Pennsylvania, and I know of one Litchfield County Dispatch in Connecticut. I've actually been working with the folks at Litchfield County. Awesome team there. But I can't remember the name of the one in Pennsylvania. But basically a private PSAP, which they do exist, is a PSAP that's operated by non-public safety entities. They are a functional alternative and have adequate means of signaling and directing response to emergencies. So one of the things that I know they do is they have the same equipment, the same type of alerting for most, but every once in a while you have to do all kinds of different things to dispatch. So if you're looking at a private entity, making sure that everybody's on the same page doing the same thing is really important. Private PSAPs are an adjunct to public safety response, and as such provide incident reporting to the public safety emergency response agencies per their local requirements. And then private PSAPs may also serve as a central station, alarm monitoring, call taking, dispatching. And so just know that private PSAPs are out there and accessible also. And then virtual PSAPs. This was interesting. So these pictures are actually from, that year that I wish never existed, 2020. But we did learn some amazing things. And we learned that virtual PSAPs are a thing and they are possible. So a virtual PSAP is an operational model directly enabled through NG 911. So we need voice over internet phone systems. We need a network. We need secured IP connectivity and all of that. That features a network hosted PSAP equipment where the telecommunicators are geographically dispersed rather than working from the same location. Remote access to the PSAP applications by the dispersed telecommunicator requires the appropriate network connections, security, workstations, equipment, and a remote location to do that. And these folks are all in their homes. And these were legit calls that were being taken during 2020 by the folks down. We had a virtual PSAP in Alexandria and Arlington, Virginia. These are the folks in Alexandria, if I remember correctly. Sorry, my brain's fried. The virtual workplace may be a logical combination of physical PSAPs and alternate work environments, such as a satellite facility or any combination above. And then workers are connected and interoperate via that IP connectivity. And if you are interested in seeing how it was done or hear how it was done, you can check out, I'll go back to that slide in just a second so I can finish this sentence. But if you click on this link in the PDF, it will bring you to this article that I wrote back on April 2nd, 2020. And the title was 911, where's the location of your dispatchers? And we talked to the folks in Arlington and Alexandria, and then the folks in Lake County, Illinois, when they had to bail on their comm center and go to another agency. So it's a pretty cool article. It doesn't say it's written by me anymore, but it was written by me. So I know what's in there, and there's some good information in there. But there's also a virtual consolidation. And this is basically separate PSAPs that are sharing equipment, software, and related infrastructure in a host or remote environment while maintaining their anonymity. So you may have a city and a county, right? And so they're two separate entities. They're dispatching totally different responder services for their particular jurisdictions, but yet it was cost effective to have a host or remote location infrastructure in one place versus doing things twice in two different places. So that is what a virtual consolidation is. And then there's the story. And now we will go into some 911 PSAP equipment. So we have our Annie and Allie controllers as part of our system. These pieces of equipment do just that. They control some things. And I have a secret decoder ring on there because that's kind of what these controllers do. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked about an ESN number, taking an address and changing it into the ESN number because the MSAG can't understand the actual address, even though it's a master address street database. Something needs to decode that, and that's where your Annie and Allie controllers come in. So an Annie controller is a standalone CPE component, and I'll tell you what a CPE is in just a couple of minutes. That one stands for customer premise equipment, so your call handling solution that provides the Annie decoding function, which is the key to controlling how that call goes through the 911 system. An Annie controller is installed between the telephone lines and the 911 phone system. And this equipment receives the Annie signal from the central office. And then remember, it has to be decoded. So we talked about that when the phone number hits the phone system and it is wrapped in a data packet and it is sent out to the database to bring back the information that is associated with it. This is one of the things that we're using. And that's the Annie controller. I'm sorry, I said Allie controller. The Allie controller, it provides access to the name, address, and address data associated with the telephone number that's calling the 911. So again, in that Annie situation, the phone number hits the PSAP, it gets wrapped up in this data question. It is sent through an Annie controller out into the databases where it can now be translated into an ESN number and then bring back that data information. Okay. And just know that it's no longer needed once we've moved over or officially moved over to the next gen 911 environment, because we're using different things there, which we will talk about in another whole section. We have our Annie and Allie displays. They are just that. So our Annie displays are the automatic number identification. Usually the Annie display is just a little display that shows just the phone number. Okay. And the PSAP again uses that Annie to receive the caller's physical location. And again, just so you understand that process, there's folks that I didn't fully understand it until I started working at Rapid SOS, and I was 20 years into my career. I always thought that all the information came in with the 911 call. And that's not always the case. Now, does everything happen quickly? Yes. But it's the phone number, the Annie that comes in first, that phone number displays, and then that phone number gets parsed out, sent back to a database, and brought back. And hopefully we'll bring back the information on the Alley display screen, which is where you see all of the information on the Alley screen. And I went over that a couple weeks ago, and the importance of knowing the information that is on your Alley screen, because there's some folks that are missing the mark when it comes to verifying some information or knowing what should be there. So you should always know what is on that display and what everything on there means. So in theory, I should be able to ask every person on this call that can hear my voice right now, what is your ESN number? And you should know what your ESN numbers are for your jurisdiction. Because if you don't know what those numbers are on your Alley display and you get a call that's misrouted to you, one of the first things you should check is to make sure that the ESN number is correct. And so I remember one in my town, but I don't remember the second one because I did it right before we left and I didn't have a lot of experience with it. But nonetheless, you should know your Annie and Alley displays. Computer telephony integration, CTI. Now, sometimes when we see these words or definitions and we're like, I have never heard of that in ever of my career in 911. Sometimes it just takes a minute to pause and break down what it is by the words that are listed there. Computer, telephony, telephony, however you say it, integration. So basically, it's a telephone through a computer, right? So many of our 911 systems are utilizing CTI. So when we first had our Mars equipment, it was a big box with all the buttons on it, and it was like green and DOS based and all that. And you had to hit the Annie Store recall button when you answered the call to make sure the information, totally barbaric, right? And then when we moved to CTI, we moved to Vesta through our 911 system in Massachusetts. It was a computer-based phone. However, it wasn't next gen yet. So there is a difference between a computer telephony integration and next gen. So just because it's a computer-based phone doesn't make it next gen. There's so much more that needs to be added for it to be next generation. So we'll go over that. It's a term that can be used to describe any technology that enables computers to interact with telephones. So computer, telephony, integration. That's it. 3 words put together, and you can identify what that definition is. And then there are intelligent workstations, IWS. And this is a cool picture that I snatched off the Zybex website because I wanted a picture of intelligent workstation, and this one had the dog in it, so I picked the one with the dog. But it's a computer-based 911 answering position equipment that includes that telephony integration. So that's kind of what you're looking at right now, this workstation that includes that telephone system, the CTI system. And again, some of this stuff you'll see it and you'll be like, I have no idea what that is. Break it down by the words you're seeing in the title of it. Call handling equipment. So it also says here, also called customer premise equipment. Call handling equipment is the actual 911 stuff inside the computer that is handling the call and changing the call and delivering the call and all that. But the customer premise equipment is the equipment that's associated with that. So they're interchangeable in a lot of places. So just know that it is called both of those things in the manual. So again, I have them both listed there. Call handling equipment, customer premise equipment. So if you think about it, look at this image that you see here. The one on the computers, the actual kind of the stuff that you see on the screens could be considered the call handling equipment, but then the actual computers themselves are the customer premise equipment. So they are used interchangeable. So just be careful when you see those definitions. So the CHE or the CPE that is on premise is equipment installed. The equipment today is VoIP enabled and has the ability to integrate voice and data. So we know that most 911 centers have moved to computer-based telephony where you can receive voice and data. What does the data look like? We're not sure because it's different in every place. Some folks are able to get additional data through a third-party integration like the Rapid SOS integration, where it will show additional information somewhere else on the screen. And then some folks are just displaying it in the alley, but as additional add-ons, because the alley screen is only able to show like 512 bytes of data or whatever. It is separate Annie and Alley controllers have been replaced by these particular systems. When it has moved over to the VoIP enabled, we no longer need those Annie and Alley controllers because things are doing things differently these days. It's incorporating sophisticated ACD stuff, automatic call distribution. I have a slide on that coming up, and then that computer telephony integration into that phone system. And the call handling function may reside in a VoIP or an MLTS, multi-line telephone system or equivalent. So that's the on-premise. Off-premise, host or remote, this is where the call handling equipment is somewhere else, and it has the capability to serve several different PSAPs if needed. So again, I always refer back to Massachusetts. Ours was a host remote environment when we moved to the next generation 911. We used to have on-premise equipment, but then now that we're in a next gen environment, everything can kind of be in one place. And then it's just distributed among the PSAPs across the state, because the state 911 oversees all of the 911 equipment here in Massachusetts. The communication circuits connect to the PSAP position or workstations back to the host control environment. It usually offers a more economic advantage, right? So as we said before, instead of having, in Massachusetts, just think about it. When all of this started with the regionalization thing, I don't know off the top of my head how many PSAPs we have now, like official PSAPs with the regional centers, but on the color-coded map, you saw all of those little communities, right? There were 256 or something when I first started as a baby dispatcher. And now they've consolidated a lot of those. So imagine the amount of money it takes to put the actual premise equipment in every single one of those PSAPs, right? So if we could have one host remote location, much easier. And some folks are using the host in the remote customer premise equipment or call handling for their CAD, their recorders, their record management, their mobile data systems. They also can be hosted remotely. And then some of the other equipment that you're going to find in your 911 center is a UPS, unlimited power supply. This is usually located inside the facility. It could be small like this, or I know the one that we used to have was probably this high off the ground. It was pretty big. but it provides the ability for attached equipment to continue operating if commercially provided power is interrupted. Note to self, those run out of power. And even though they are called an uninterrupted power supply, it is not to be confused with an endless power supply. It uninterrupted means the power will go out, will turn back on, everything's great. But if your center is without hardwired, hardline power to be able to take back over at some point, this could stop working. It happened in my center. We had a huge storm back in 2012. We lost all of our regular phone lines when the power went out to the node for Comcast and Verizon in our area, and the battery backup on those died. And then eventually our 911 system also went down. It had never been so quiet in my 911 center. And thank you to anyone from Marion Police that picked up our slack during that storm. Just because it says uninterrupted, it's not unlimited, right? And it also protects against commercial outages, lightning strikes, brownouts, and power spikes. So that's going to be that buffer between the power going out and taking out your entire system. And then we have the electrical generators that are usually located on the outside of the facility. They provide power in the event of a commercial power loss as well, but they're on the outside of the building, and this is usually going to power the building itself. And they rely on natural gas, diesel, regular gasoline. And it's important to do routine tests of your generators. And there should be an indicator light or alarm in your 911 center that tells you you are on the backup generator power. Again, this was a lesson that we learned that we did not have anything in dispatch that notified us that we were on generator, because everything ran as normal. And when we ran into some issues with another storm where the power went out and our generator kicked on, unfortunately the generator caught on fire. And so when the power came back on, there was no way for when the power didn't come back on because the generator didn't kick on because it malfunctioned and caught on fire, my dispatcher couldn't even see the generator, and that heavy black smoke was billowing out of said generator through the camera system. So it was an officer who came into dispatch when the dispatcher called him on a cell phone, and they realized very quickly that they had to just go out on portables to notify the fire department. Everything was okay after that. Again, very quiet in our comm center, but always want to have a backup to a backup to a backup, and policies and procedures on place, how to deal with these things. System controllers. This is one of those NFI items. NFI stands for no freaking idea. I have no freaking idea what they are looking for with this. It is on the body of knowledge as just system controllers. And the only definition that I could find was controls and monitor 911 calls from the controller to the 911 center. So if there is more to that, if anyone knows what they're looking for this, by all means, if you find it, I always say, because there's a couple of these that you'll see throughout the presentations that they're NFI words. I have no idea what they are looking for or how vast. I know the EMD law is one of them. I don't know what they're looking for, because as far as the EMD goes, there are only certain states that actually have laws that say that you have to do it, etc. So I will always tell you, if there's this big question mark, dude, like, I don't know what they're looking for, but it is on the body of knowledge. I can't find it specifically in the book. So if anyone finds it or knows what it's looking for, please let me know. Then there are gateways, and I'm going to jump over to this slide because I wanted to spell it out a little clearer. Gateways are a piece of networking hardware used in telecommunications for telecommunication networks that allow data to flow from one discrete network to another. Gateways are distinct from routers or switches in that they communicate using more than one protocol to connect multiple networks and can operate at any of the 7 layers of the Open Systems Interconnection Model, OSI. You don't need to know what OSI is. However, what you do want to know is when they're referring to gateways, and we're going to go through, there's going to be like 6 gateways that I'm going to teach you about later, but I'm going to use this one as an example. This is a legacy network gateway. So, what happens inside of that gateway is if we have a legacy 911 call that gets placed, so the typewriter is the legacy 911 center, they have not moved to any type of computer based system. But we need to transfer that 911 call, and we need to manually transfer that 911 call that has come in on the legacy network to a next generation 911 PSAP. Now, you know that you've been able to manually transfer calls for quite some time, but what maybe you didn't know is that between this legacy 911 center and this next generation 911 center, there is something called a legacy network gateway, an NLNG. Sorry. So what happens is that call goes into the gateway using one protocol, and then it does its thing in there, and then it comes out using another protocol. So the difference between that, if you look at a traditional router, it means that the information comes in and then it just kind of sends it out in the same format in which it is. So if you think of your cable router, right, it's not changing anything. It's just making it so it can have a broader network, a wider range. So just know the difference between a gateway and a router. Okay. And we're going to go more into gateways a little bit later. The ACD, the automated call distributor, I can tell you this was something that a lot of folks don't realize. They just assume that it's in every single 911 center, and it's not. Usually they are in much larger centers or centers that have multiple call takers or more than one call taker. But in a smaller 911 center, you don't always have an ACD environment. But the ACD systems are call routing utilities for incoming calls and can evenly route calls by a predictive dialer to the next available agent. So whatever it is, yep. So in Broward, are you in Florida, Laurel? I would assume that's a bigger agency, right? Or are you a Broward that's not in Florida and you're a much smaller agency? Because I know there are different named agencies. Uh, but basically, when that 911 call comes in, it has the ability to do a few things. So I do some work in Cincinnati, and I know there are times where, okay, yeah, so you guys are definitely a bigger agency. But it's not just about sending it to the next available operator. It might actually be just sending it to one particular operator. So there are ways that you can manually dictate which way the call's going to go, whether it's the person that's been, free the longest, who's going to get the most recent call, is this type of call, is an abandoned call going to go to this particular dispatcher because they're the ones that are handling the call back. So it's an automated call distributor that can be identified in many different ways. And then how many of you just shivered? Kate, we have settings so that our trainees receive more. Oh, look at that. I like that. If you can read in the comments, over in actually they can't because it looks like it came just to the host. Some agencies up in Canada, they have it where the trainees actually receive more calls than others, which is okay, right? So give them the experience so they're not just kind of sitting there waiting for a call. As far as the recording equipment go, I had no choice but to go find this. This looks like the 911 phone system. Ours was much taller and bigger and scarier, and in a back closet that I didn't love going into at midnight to change over the tapes for the recording. And for those of you that don't know what I mean by tape, it literally it was like a tape. Um, and if you said something really stupid on the radio, yeah, there was not a whole lot of getting around that, unless you just pulled out the whole tape and put in a new one. Um, but recording equipment, this is how most communications into 911 are logged, and the recordings provide the records needed in many court cases. Most voice and most 911 and admin lines into 911 centers are being recorded these days. I don't know of many that are not. And just side note, just remember you're on a recorded line, because I really don't want you to be added to a slide in one of my liability classes, because we say some foolish things sometimes, and even when we were talking to other agencies. But involved in a few incidents with some centers recently where they've had to have some calls pulled, and court cases they're not just asking for the call, they're asking for a time frame. They're asking for all of the calls between this time and this time. So just as you're talking to that neighboring agency and you're saying silly things, just keep in mind it could get pulled at any time for any reason. But they are usually retained for a fixed time frame. I know here in Massachusetts, well, I think the 911 calls, we had to keep them for a minimum of 3 years. So if at any point you know that something might be needed, you might need to flag it. Instant recall recorders, IRRs, are usually located at the telecommunicators console. I will tell you that I've come across several agencies that are not utilizing instant call IRRs. They've disabled them, and I think that is beyond crazy. And if anyone can justify why they're doing it, and just for the record, to prevent trainees from relying on it, is not a valid answer. Actually, it's more of a liability situation if we're shutting off that IRR, because we don't want folks relying on it as trainees. Remember, we have to we have to train our ears to hear the things that we have to hear. And so I would always encourage my trainees to go back and listen if they weren't sure what they heard, number one. And number two, in many of my training classes, I talk about being able to play that 911 call back. There are times that we've had some very tragic situations because the telecommunicator did not play the call back. And if they had played the call back, they might have heard something that was said right at the beginning of the call before they actually engaged in the call, or further along in the call. If they had to talk to their officer and maybe they told the person, hold on, but the person said something pretty important, I always encourage, and that's just a little side note, because I told you, I'm not going to just teach you the things for the test. If I have something to say, I'm going to say it. So that's my opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth. Some PSAPs use screen recording as a part of their training and quality assurance and improvement programs. And a lot of folks have mixed feelings on this, but anytime you can record something in the center, it is going to both protect the caller and the call taker, right? So whenever something changes and something's new, folks get a little stressed out and squirrely, and that includes any type of equipment that is going to record anything, whether it's on our phone systems, in the dispatch center, in the cruisers, on their person. I mean, bottom line, do the right thing, and we really don't have a lot to worry about, right? And then computer aided dispatch. There is not many agencies that I know about that do not have CAD these days. There are some, but computer aided dispatch. Most PSAPs are utilizing the automated system for the call taking and dispatching process. It's a computerized record of the incidents that are called in or processed through the 911 center, whether it's through 911, from the radio, comes in via text. Most are client server based. They have the equipment in the 911 center, but we are seeing that many of the CADs are starting to move towards that cloud-based solution. And while I'm definitely afraid of the cloud, I know that this is kind of the way to go, and it's much easier. It's resilient. It's redundant. If I have to pick up and move somewhere else, I mentioned Lake County in Illinois when they had to beat feet from their 911 center because cooties hit them rampant and they had to bring in a cleaning company. They were able to just pop on over to another agency and kind of log into their stuff remotely. So that's super cool and beneficial, but it's scary, right? And the CAD may be able to interface with some external databases such as NCAIC, the RMV or DMV, whatever you call it in your jurisdiction, the place that creates the license plates and the information that goes along with them. The RMS record management system is a computerized records or reports handled by the agency that is dispatched from their communication centers. So sometimes the CAD is the RMS, but then sometimes they have an additional RMS where the officers may write their reports and gather other data that's available. Sometimes if it is a separate entity, it's just an extension of the CAD, and chances are they interface with each other. I know that happens sometimes with fire departments. So I know when we first moved to the IMC CAD, our fire department used a different record management system, but the CAD was able to interface with it where they were able to pull in some of that information. So it's basically an extension of the CAD. Most include demographical and personal data such as fingerprints, mugshots, other related images. Most RMS solutions hook and related data to other data systems. So some of these systems also, if you have one agency that's using it and then the neighboring agency that's using it, they may give each other permission to access each other's records to make sure that, you know, if they're dealing with a knucklehead, they have all the pieces to that puzzle. And it's also called, in the body of knowledge, it is called a management information system, an MIS. So in the book, record management system. On the body of knowledge, management information system. That's logical, right? Okay. Our mobile data systems, these are units in the vehicles that allow our officers to see the calls from dispatch, as well as allow, with permission, them to access NCIC and FBI information. They used to be called dumb terminals. I'm going to keep my jokes to myself because it's the appropriate thing to do. But they were limited, right? And they were very slow. And so our officers would always say, hey, can you run? Hey, can you run? Hey, can you run? And we used to get frustrated, but just know that there's a lot of times that information, you know, especially earlier on in the days, it took a long time for that information to get back, and for officer safety reasons. So when I do my training, I always encourage folks to understand, like, yeah, maybe you do have a lazy officer out there who doesn't want to run it, or, you know, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they're driving and they really shouldn't be typing while they're driving, or, you know, the information hasn't come back yet and they have a potential situation that they need to have the information for. So there's that. There are times that they are called MDCs, mobile data computers, and MDTs, mobile data terminals. They are usually more rugged because sometimes they come out of the vehicles. I know in EMS, we're bringing them in and out of the hospital all the time, bringing them into the house. Note to self, don't leave it on the back of the ambulance when you're loading the patient. Yep, saw that happen once. But they are usually connected via a public safety broadband network, PSBN, which aims to combine both mobile broadband and public safety reliability and ruggedness. So it is a very protected network because there's a lot of personal information that goes through that computer, and we want to make sure that it is protected accordingly. AVL, automatic vehicle location, is another piece of equipment or tool in the center. It works with mobile data systems to allow the vehicles to be tracked in the dispatch center, and they can be used for zone dispatching, making sure we have the appropriate response, the closest response, the most timely response. I know that there are folks in the field that do not like it. They don't appreciate it, but I know those telecommunicators really do appreciate it. And it has been beneficial for both the responders and the folks on the other side of the radio. So just know that that's the definition of that. Mapping and GIS, we'll go into this a little bit further when we talk more about GIS. But in general, as a tool inside under the equipment section, geographically seeing the caller's location on a digital map. And then wireless 911 calls require GIS or digital mapping software to properly display the provided latitude and longitude or the identified cell tower. Okay. So if you think about when we move towards, again, when we move from the Mars equipment that did not have any type of mapping, it was not a computer-based terminal, to a computer-based terminal, that's when we were able to start seeing those locations being plotted digitally with the latitude and longitude or showing the cell tower location. Telecommunications devices for the deaf, TDD or TTY. I've been doing a lot of work on this with an agency that I've been working with. And when I do my sessions and I talk about the importance of understanding the TTY function on your phone system, I have a lot of folks that look at me like I have lobsters coming out of my ears. And what I'm going to encourage you to do at minimum is head on over to the resource that I have listed there and take a look at the ABCO NINA ANSI standard for the minimum training standard for TTY and TDD use in the Public Safety Communication Center. There's a lot of folks that don't know that this standard exists, and it is highly recommended that you know what's in there and that you're testing your folks and making sure they're testing. The standard says they should be tested on it every 6 months or so to make sure that they know how to properly use the equipment. What we do know is that most folks that are in the deaf or hard of hearing community are utilizing some type of relay service or text to 911. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get one of these calls. So the TDD and TTY knowledge, it allows for deaf and hard of hearing or hearing impaired community to be able to communicate with 911. They can be an agency that is contracted through 911 or a standalone machine or built into the 911 phone system. And if it's not built into your 911 system, chances are you're on a very old legacy environment. And if you still have to take the phone and the handset and put it on a TTY device, I recommend going back and practicing that because you don't want to get caught not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then even if you are utilizing it through your phone system, if you haven't checked for TTY in a while, you might want to review the reasons and what the standard says about when we should be checking for TTY. There are two types of calls. The first one is a silent call. We hear nothing. And there is also a misconception that if somebody's going to use a TTY, they're automatically going to hit the tweedle and it's going to engage. And that is not always the case. And so you need to engage it if there is a silent call, or let me rephrase that. The standard says you do what your policy says, but the standard says the two types of calls that you should be utilizing or checking for TTY on is a silent call or a non-responsive call, meaning I hear somebody talking in the background, they're not responding to me. And I know that changes the game for most, because that would mean every butt dial. And I know we're not doing it on every butt dial, but if you are a mom or a dad in a 911 center, it might behoove you to go back and check on the standard and make sure that you're following it to the most letter of the degree. Because even though it's a standard and it's what folks are standardly doing, this is what's going to be used as a standard for the industry. So just keep that in mind, because if we're not utilizing the TTY to the standard, then we're going to have to deal with Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title II requires the deaf and hard of hearing community to have access, just like everybody else does, to 911, but it also requires self-evaluations to assure that that equal access is accessible. We know they're moving away from it, but nonetheless. And then here is the resource that's there. So when you get the PDF, you'll be able to check that out. And then the last piece of equipment that we're going to talk about is the time synchronization. This can be used to connect all of the equipment in the 911 center to the clock that is synchronized so that the times are accurate and connected. It's usually called a network clock or a net clock. It sits up on the wall in the 911 center. There are a lot of folks that don't realize that based on where this computer, where the computer is that is attached to this particular clock, has the capability of bringing in an interface to make sure that your 911 phone system, your CAD, your records management, anything that your video system, they could all be connected to it. And then they are all on the same time frame, and that time is synchronized. Some agencies utilize that feature, some do not. So with that said, we just have a couple more things, and actually, yeah, we just got a couple more things, and then looks like you're going to get out a little early of class today. The Annie and Allie investigative reference notes are actually stand by to stand by. I just want to see something. Okay, let me reshare. I thought I forgot to add something here, so stand by. It is added. All right. So as far as the way that some of the calls come into the 911 center, the first one I want to talk about is an anonymous call. And these come through on the 911 system. It happens once in a while. So way back under the surface of your 911 phone system, even though the number that is dialed is 911, there is a 10-digit number that is associated with that 911 trunk line. That's how it exists. Now, they try not to reuse the numbers or use a number that has been used before, but every once in a while, if somebody fat fingers a key, they can place a call into the 911 system where nothing is displayed, and it is what is considered an anonymous call into the 911 system. So it's when the 10-digit number calls the 911 directly through that phone number that sits behind 911. The call is not processed by the selective router because it's not going through the system the way that it should be. And then while the service providers tries to assign the numbers that have never been assigned, some sneak through and some folks may fat finger the keys. So there's that. Then there is no display. It's simply put, call comes in and there's no display. There's nothing on the display. It is not the same as no record found. And with that, either way, if there is no display or no record found listed, there is a problem somewhere and somebody needs to fix it. So if there's no display, there's a chance there's something wrong with the equipment in the center, the CPE. The no record found we'll go over in a second, but simply put, no display. There's nothing on the display. There's not one letter, not one number. It's just a blank display. And while it may be hard to file a discrepancy on a blank display, if you're speaking to the caller and they're giving you a location, they're giving you a phone number, they're giving you their name, they're telling you where they are, that's the information you would use. You would use the time of the call, at the time that the call came in, et cetera, or time frame for the discrepancy report, because we need to find out why there's no display there. Is there a problem with our system further down the line? Is it the equipment in the center or what? And then no record found. Again, a lot of folks are not filling out discrepancies on no record found. And if you're not, shame on you, because they do pose a problem. There could be an issue along the service line, or it could be a recent telephone number change and it just didn't get to where it was supposed to be. It could be being ported over, and it's kind of in this middle land, like Mike TV. Remember when Mike TV and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, like he's over here and then he's like up in the ceiling and he's like in little pieces and then he lands and he makes it there. Well, this could happen when it's up in the middle and it's moving from one place to another. But no record found, when it appears on the screen, no record found, a discrepancy report should be filed. And again, you're not going to have any information. However, the time, the situation, maybe the location if it's available, maybe the phone number if it's available, somebody's going to check and see why this call came through with no record found. And I don't think I used these before, but if I did, I'm going to use them again here and reiterate the importance of having the Rapid SOS portal. Because when a no record found comes into your 911 center, it means that the phone did not go through the network as it should. And this was my friend Damian Rice in Kentucky had given me these two particular calls so I could show the importance of the portal and show folks the magnitude of why we need to report when there's a problem. And so he had noticed that back-to-back calls came in right here. There's a number listed here, no record found. This is an erratic operator for this particular call, not to be confused with an erotic operator, which I've said before. And the information was showing on the Rapid SOS portal. It's showing exactly where the vehicle's going, approximately how fast the car is going, what direction they're traveling in, when nothing came in over on the phone system. And then this one came in right behind it. Another no record found. This one is a medical emergency. The person is driving down the street. They pull over, they park in a parking lot, and they're looking for help. And again, no record found. If this person went unconscious before this phone call was completed and the call taker wasn't able to get the location, then that call taker is SOL. So if you do not have the portal logged in at the beginning of every shift and you have access to it, shame on you, because there is nothing worse than having to try to figure out what your password is in the middle of a situation like this, when this may be the only way you get access to that information. But again, no record found, discrepancy report, have your portal open and accessible at all times. And then a party line. Now, we don't use these anymore, but they are listed in the book. The party line was a local telephone loop circuit that had more than one subscriber, and they were sharing this loop. A party line will not always provide correct Annie and Allie information following a 911 call. A 4-party line will show an Allie failure. I don't think we have any of these anymore, but just know they wreaked havoc on the 911 system when when 911 first started handling these calls. And then dual service, which I think is the last one, maybe, is a service that is servicing the same dial tone to two different locations. So if I was moving from my old house to here, I could request dual service for a period of time, meaning that call, if I was to dial that phone number, the call is going to go to both locations. Okay. And you need to be careful with that. It's very similar to VoIP, remember? So VoIP is kind of like a dual phone service when you were able to have your phone up here and down in Florida. So the new location address is displayed if they call 911 on a true dual from the phone service. It's the opposite way if they don't change their location on a VoIP phone call. And that's it. So you get a few minutes back in your day, and here is the content. My contact information. So if anyone is needing anything further, you can ask questions through that quick contact form. Like and follow my social media. That's super awesome. I appreciate that. So do my sponsors. They get to see their stuff too. And down in that lower right-hand corner is the On Scene First Safety Net group. If you request access on Facebook, it is a safe place for first responders to have hard conversations about mental health if you're struggling and just looking for some advice or a shoulder. The folks in there have been amazing. So please ask for access to that, but just make sure you list your agency and the one that you're working for, so I don't have to play defective detective to try to find out where you work to give you access. And until next time, heroes, stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. We need you. Thank you. Have a great weekend.